Speaking to Channels Television, an emergency specialist with the United Nations Children's Fund explained that the 2012 flood disaster has taught the nation to take proactive steps to avert a similar situation.
We need to have these at the back of our mind that 2012 predictions were very, very fast, very rapid. It was as a result of the release of excess water from the Lagdo Dam in Cameroon, and they did that, of course, with the hindsight that downstream, which is the Benue River, all the way from Adamawa and the rest of it, will definitely receive water, large amount of water moving very fast. And in 2012, before we know it, we have a very large crisis in our hands. The reason being that we don't have any lower level dam on the Benue River. In fact, we have no single dam on the Benue River that could have received the water and, systematically release it to the Delta region. So we had that problem. But in the current alert, it's actually on the Niger River, coming all the way from Niger Republic, entering the country at the upper northwestern side. So the effect will hit first states like Kebbi, Sokoto, down to Kano, Kaduna, and then calm down. But the good thing about that wing, that wing of Nigeria, is that we have two dams. We have the Kenji Dam, and we have the Shiroro Dam on that side of the country. So whatever it is that we receive, the impact, of course, the first impact it had on the northwest states, but it will be controlled relatively by the two dams that are on that particular axis. But the water level, the water volume will still be the same. So basically, we are likely to receive it on a slow and gradually increasing volume. And then it begins to spread all the way to Kogi, down to, of course, Lokoja on the Benue axis. And then when it comes together and then goes down to places like Anambra, Delta, Bayelsa, those are usually the receiving states. And because of the nature of the Delta, they are already, the groundwater is saturated in those areas. So it will again, give us, a similar situation like we saw if the magnitude is the same, for the previous years. So I think the similarities is that, well, the floods are likely to be massive, but the difference is that we're on the Niger River, and that has two dams that could help reduce the direct impacts and then may also reduce the heaviness of the impacts.
Okay, the thing is that we're wondering now, how is Nigeria prepared at this time? Because Nigerians are used to fire brigade approach, when it's only when it comes face to face to confront us, and then we start to take action.
Yeah, I think the good thing is that 2012 was a landmark event for most of the humanitarian stakeholders. At the same time, it was also an eye opener for the states. The states that responded better in 2012 got better results. Those that didn't react on time and they were seriously affected. It affected their economy, it destroyed their infrastructure, and for a long time they struggled to get back to where they were before 2012. So that got most of them thinking, and since then we've seen a lot of changes. We've seen state emergency management agencies being set up by the states. We've seen them being equipped. We've seen them join us in the preparedness planning. For the past 4 years, we've had contingency planning for floods every year, and we've had series of simulation exercises that helps them to better prepare. And I want to remind Nigerians that we've actually had floods since 2012. It was just that it was not in the magnitude of the challenges of 2012. And it wasn't that, also it couldn't have been, as bad, but because there was some level of, readiness, some level of, better prepared response, some level of proactiveness on the part of the state governments, and also the humanitarian, workers got experienced, from 2012, and they've been applying that. For instance, you see a lot of city channels. When you talk about canals in the cities being cleaned up regularly before the rains, and so now you have water flowing much more faster. And
You're talking in which states?
Lagos State, for instance, I know they do that. They have what they call the drain ducts, and they do that every 3 months, and then they drain. The same thing, Osun State did the same thing, dredged the river Osun and the river that passes through the major towns in Osogbo. Osogbo used to be one of those crazy states. Even before 2012, they were having severe flooding, but they built embankments and all of that. Akwa Ibom State is another state that did massive work in underground storm water drainage and all that. So all of these has helped to take us to where we are today. We're only hoping that 2016 will be a very good year, that this will help, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. It's just that because we have a higher level of preparedness, and if we're able to create massive awareness, because people are never willing to understand that this is a risk to their lives, this is a risk to their farmlands, this is a risk to their properties, or and they just want to take it and say, I wait until I see it. Now we're saying that the risk level is high, and people are wondering, oh, but it's not raining. The fact is that floods are of various types. Don't forget that now, if you notice, we're getting a lot more electricity. The reason for that is because the dams are filled, and so there's no shortage of water for running, the hydrological systems that gives us power, the hydroelectric system. You understand? So flood is good. Flood is also good for farming. It's good for agricultural, saving of water for irrigation purposes and all of that. But it can be dangerous when it moves uncontrolled.
Exactly. Are we gonna do we stand at risk of getting an overflow of the dams and all?
Yes, of course. At any point, the river basin development authorities, the dam managers are trained to know when it is at high risk level, and then they would alert the people downstream. And they have some reservoir dams that they can release to within that are small for irrigation purposes, so they fill those ones up rather quickly, and then that allows the water pressure to reduce. And even though the water comes, it's not gushing at a rate that it could pull down a house, or how water behaves once you let it loose.
As an emergency specialist, I mean, you're on ground, you're seeing what's happening. The states mostly that are under threat, at least for now. What's the immediate reaction of these people?
Already, some of them are experiencing the challenges already. Kano had 3 days ago. Sokoto has had Sokoto Kebbi has had a week, 2 weeks back, and they're still at higher risk because the water level in Niger is still rising, and then of course it will come down.
Are they willing to evacuate their homes?
The evacuation is always a relative thing, because you need to simply move to higher ground, and then you move back, especially because majority of these people living along these plains, they are farmers.
Yes.
So they actually are waiting for the floods to better fertilize their plains, and then they want to quickly start planting and all of that. So when you tell them that their lives are at risk, that's the only thing that gets them scared. But as far as the water is concerned, they welcome the water. But what we're saying now is that their lives are at risk, because the water level can rise above what they can manage. It can, lead to loss of lives. It can lead to loss of properties. Buildings can collapse and all of that when they are submerged in water.